everybody, my name is Katie O'Hara, and today I am going to complete and present to you about the nervous system inside of our bodies and yoga's effects on the nervous system. There are many positive impacts that yoga can have on the nervous system, so I would like to share some of those with you today. I'm going to start off with my presentation by going over some of the main organs that are involved in the nervous system, as well as the location of those organs in the body. I'm also going to break down into it a little bit further and tell you a little bit more about neurons. I've got a diagram and I'm going to go over the structure of a neuron, so what that looks like. We're also going to break out into the central nervous system versus peripheral nervous system, which there's two sections of the peripheral nervous system, the somatic and the autonomic nervous systems. But we'll get more into that later. I'll talk about some benefits of the nervous system, benefits of yoga on the nervous system, physically, as well as I will provide some examples of how pranayama can impact our nervous system, as well as some asanas or postures that support our nervous system. And then I'm going to go ahead and end it. I've got a nice 6-minute sequence to help calm the nervous system at the end there. So I've got a little video where I will show and talk through a short asana sequence that will be beneficial in calming the nervous system. So I hope you all enjoy. Hi everybody, my name is Katie O'Hara. So first we are going to go over the main organs of the nervous system, or the main parts in the body that contribute to the nervous system. So you have two main sections of your nervous system. You have your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. In the central nervous system, it consists of the brain and spinal cord primarily. Within those we have nerves and also neurons, which we'll get a little bit more into in a little bit. The central nervous system serves as the assessment and the control center for the nervous system. So for peripheral nervous system, you have the somatic peripheral nervous system and then also the autonomic peripheral nervous system. You also have nerves and neurons within here as well. So the somatic versus autonomic peripheral nervous system, we're going to get into a little more in depth in a little bit with some examples, but I will go ahead and say that the somatic nervous system underneath the peripheral nervous system goes to skeletal muscles and some organs, so it's generally thought of as our voluntary movement in response to signals that it receives. And then our autonomic is more of our involuntary movements, so feeling, breath, signals to the heart, things that we don't necessarily have as much control over. So the peripheral nervous system, nerves go all over the body and they signal back and forth from the spinal column to the rest of the body. They're connected between 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and then there's 31 pairs of spinal nerves that branch off of your spinal column and go out into the body. Your body's going to receive those signals through the peripheral nervous system, and they're going to send them up to the central nervous system to be processed. Make sense of this. So let's say you feel something on your arm. That's a peripheral nerve that's receiving it in. It's going to send it up to the brain to process. What is this? There's a lot going on in the brain at this point as well, because if it feels similar to something that's previously happened, then your brain might think that it's something specific. So if you feel something in your arm and it feels like a bug, but you look down and it's just a hair, you might have actually started to go into a fight or flight response with adrenaline rush, increase of heart rate and breath, because you're thinking that it could be something harmful to you. If that makes a little bit of sense there. We're going to get into neurons in just a second as well and get a little bit more in detail about the difference between sensory and motor neurons. So here we have a diagram for the location of all of the major organs involved in our nervous system. It's kind of an oversimplified diagram, but it was the best one that I felt could kind of portray what is involved. So as you can see at the top of the diagram here, you can see the brain that's placed inside the skull, which is part of our central nervous system, our processing center. It's going to make sense of things that we feel in our environment. And then we have our spinal cord, so that's kind of like our messenger cord. And it's going to send signals up to the brain, but also responses will come back down through the spinal cord and go out to those peripheral nerves. So as I said previously, the peripheral nervous system has 31 pairs of nerves that come off of the spine and into the rest of the body so that they can start branching off into smaller areas of the body and interpret those signals that are received from their environment. So here we have a pretty simplified breakdown of the different type of neurons that are in our body. So neurons are the cells that communicate between each other to send information, send signals to and from the central nervous system back out to the body so that we can make a response. So for your basic neuron, you've got the cell body, or they call it the soma. And branching off of the cell body, you've got this long tail-like structure, and they call it the axon. And then at the very end, they've got what we call dendrites. So they kind of branch out almost like a little tree at the end of that cell. And so what happens is the dendrites of one of the cell take in information from the previous neuron, and it's going to process it and continue to send that signal all the way down the axon until it gets to the next one. In between the neurons, there's a little gap, and they call a synapsis. And so in between there's neurotransmitters, so like chemicals that are released that transmit the information from one cell to the next. On the next slide, I actually have a nice little diagram so I can talk a little bit more about what all of these structures are inside of the neuron. But I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of the different types here as well. There's also something called a sensory neuron. So sensory neurons conduct impulses that are received to the central nervous system to be processed. So if I touch a hot stove, the sensory neuron sends very quickly a signal up to my brain, and my brain sends a signal back and says, "Whoa, that's hot, take your hand off of it." So that would then be the motor neuron coming back. So it conducts an impulse from the CNS, so from your central nervous system, to my peripheral organ. So sensory neuron feels the hand on the hot stove, sends it up to the brain. Brain sends back a motor signal via motor neurons to conduct the impulse, "Hey, take your hand off of that stove, it's hot." Does that make sense? So it's a little bit to process, but if you really just stop and think about some actions, it makes sense. So sensory comes in and it gives out a motor input based on how your brain interprets the signal that it receives. Most nerves have both sensory and motor neurons so that they can, again, interpret the information and then also produce a motor output. Most nerves have both so that you can do both, and it's not generally a one-way street there, if that makes sense. Here's our beautiful picture of our neuron and all of the structures that it entails. I briefly talked about some of the basic structures that are in neurons. This picture has a little bit more information than I previously discussed. I'm not going to go into all of it because I just really want everybody to understand the general idea of how neurons work. So if you look to the full structure over to the left, you can see the big yellow part. So that is your cell body or your soma. And then if you come down a little bit to the right, you're going to see that axon and how it extends out all the way down until it gets to the synapse, where that's going to be connecting to another neuron. All the little branches coming off, as you can see on the cell body, but also the synapse, are the dendrites, and that's how it helps to communicate, and it's got lots of points of communication there. I will mention that along the axon there, they've got something called the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is a fatty tissue that mostly develops during the first few years of life. That's why it's so important as infants to get the amount of fat necessary in their diet, because it helps this myelin sheath develop in the brain, as well as all of their neurons. So that's just a little fun fact that I have about that. But if you go ahead and look over to the right side of the picture, it's got kind of a zoomed in section of what a synapse looks like. And so as you can see at the top, it says presynaptic neuron. So that's the signal would be coming from this one. And it creates all these neurotransmitters. They release them into the synaptic space, where there's receptors that will absorb in those neurotransmitters and go on to the postsynaptic neuron, or the next one in line, if that makes a little bit more sense. So the neurotransmitters, whatever is released into that space, will be absorbed to continue to transmit signals to further neurons throughout the body. So as I said previously, this could be a sensory neuron where it's giving information up to the central nervous system for processing, so that your mind and body can make sense of what's happening. Or this might be a motor neuron where the central nervous system or the brain has processed this already and is sending out information to the body so that you may have an appropriate response in order to move the body and make a proper decision on where your body should move at this moment. So for this slide, we are going to spend a little bit of time here because I really want us to differentiate between the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. So as I've said previously, they are both underneath the peripheral nervous system, which again consists of those 12 cranial nerves, but then also the 31 pairs of spinal nerves that branch off of the spinal column and come out into the body. So we'll go ahead and get started with our somatic nervous system. So soma actually means body in Greek. So I like to think of the somatic system as being your voluntary or controlling movement in the body, or the skeletal muscles. So we have our beautiful picture over here on the right side of our screen of our yogi or yogini, and it looks like they are doing their tree pose, but I'm a little concerned because their foot might be resting on their knee, but we'll forgive them for this beautiful photo and allowing me to use it as an example. So maybe the tactile or the touch processing system is going to feel the ground beneath them. Maybe it's sand, maybe it's a rock, but that's going to send a signal up to the central nervous system with what it feels. So then the central nervous system is then going to process it and decide how it feels, and then send an appropriate response on how to move or adjust the foot or the posture to increase stability for balance. Does that make sense? So if this person's standing on sand and it suddenly shifts, the tactile and probably proprioceptive and vestibular input are going to send signals all the way up to the brain. The brain's going to send a motor neuron response back down so that you're going to shift and catch yourself and not fall. I hope that makes sense. And just use vestibular and proprioceptive input. Let me go ahead and talk about what that means. So your vestibular system actually processes movement, and it works closely with positioning of the head and also the eyes. So that's how you can process balance and where you are kind of in space. but it works very closely with your proprioceptive system. So that sensory system, it has a lot of receptors, mostly through the joints in your body. Like, you have the most proprioceptive receptors in the joints, like the larger joints, so like your shoulders and your hips. But that actually tells you also where your body is in space. Proprioception has a lot to do with body awareness, but the two work very closely together, because your vestibular also processes like movement, not necessarily just of the head and the eyes. So I don't know if anybody, watching this presentation gets car sick, but what happens to me when I get motion sick in the car is because, I might be looking down. My body processes and feels that I'm moving, but my eyes looking in the car, it looks like nothing's moving and we're not going anywhere. And so that conflict of input of the perception that I'm not moving, but my body feeling that I'm moving, causes an imbalance, and it makes me feel nauseous, because it's too much input and I can't appropriately process that. So some people are just more sensitive to the vestibular input than others, and some are more sensitive to vestibular, like linear movement, so straight back and straight forward or side to side. Some people are more sensitive to rotary or the circular input. I had little kids when I worked in outpatient pediatric occupational therapy that could sit on a swing and spin for several minutes straight and stop and not be dizzy, never get sick. Their body just could not get enough. They were constantly seeking out that input in order to try to feel and to register it. Whereas I can sit on the swing and go back and forth a few times, and I can start to feel a little bit dizzy. So everybody's different. Let's see. I did want to also talk about her visual input here. So I already kind of mentioned that, the eyes relate a lot to vestibular as far as where is my head and how am I oriented in space. But finding your drishti, or your focused gaze and concentrated intention, is going to be helpful also for that balance. So from a sensory-based perspective, if you can allow your eyes to focus on a single non-moving point, it helps tell the body that you're not in motion and that you are stable, which should, I'm going to put that a little caveat in quotes, should support your ability to balance, along with all of these other elements that we've kind of already talked about. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the autonomic nervous system. So autonomic nervous system is more of those internal receptors and receptors for the soft organs in your body. So for autonomic, I like to think automatic, so it's involuntary, and your body is able to complete these things automatically without you having to think about them. I also relate this a lot to that fight or flight response with the release of epinephrine and adrenaline when your brain perceives danger. So let's say our little yogini friend up here starts to fall. Her or his heart rate might increase, and along with the increase is going to be that release of epinephrine and adrenaline. But that's all of those things are in our bodies because as we've evolved, that's what saved our lives previously. So your level of alertness increases, and so you're either going to fight, so you might fight to stay standing and keep that balance, or you might kind of just give up so that you don't fall and get hurt. You're not going to do nothing. It's going to give your body that quick response in order to, either save yourself or, or kind of give up, or run away, I guess, is the idea there, fight or flight. But your body does this in a response for perceived danger. Which brings me to my next point. I wanted to note that this is what happens with anxiety. So anxiety is a real physical response to a perceived danger. So even if there's not a real threat there, your body's real response to it can be debilitating. I know that I've always struggled with, I always thought it was kind of maybe more general, but I think it's more of a social anxiety. So if I'm out in public and I perceive that somebody across the table is talking about me because I see them laugh, and then all of a sudden I think that they're laughing at me, and I begin to sweat, and my heart rate goes up, and I get this rush of adrenaline and epinephrine, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm a flight. I'm like, I need to get out of here because these people, are talking about me and they're laughing at me, and I need to go. Again, they probably are not paying any attention to me. I'm just somebody that happened to be there, and I happened to make eye contact with one of them, so then naturally I assumed it was about me. But I had that real response to that perceived danger or threat in my mind, and it turned into a very real physical response to that perceived danger. So I just wanted to mention that can happen in the autonomic nervous system, and that's what's responsible for that. So even if it's not anything real, if I'm not being, obviously being chased by a wild animal or something would cause that same response, but with anxiety, it's just the perception of a real danger causes a very real response. So this slide just breaks down some of the physical benefits of yoga on the nervous system. This information was obtained from our wonderful yoga toolbox. So yoga can help to support the overall health of your nerves as well as your spinal cord. It can benefit the fine motor movements. It can support the health of your brain. Back, forward, and side bends, as well as twists, help maintain the health and the flexibility of your spinal column and the spinal cord through enhanced mobility and circulation. So if you think about all of those motions, bending forward, doing some back bends, some side bends, as well as twisting, really helps to open up the spine, and it helps to keep it flexible and moving in all directions. So this will improve its mobility, as well as promoting appropriate circulation. So the better circulation that we can have through our circulatory system, so our blood circulation there is what I'm referring to when I say circulation, the more that we can get oxygen to those nerves, to those muscles, and it's really just going to keep our body in good communication with itself, as well as helping it to heal and continue to grow and create new connections. As we know, yoga is not just about the physical body. It's about the mind, it's about the spirit, it's about bringing all of these elements together to find balance. So I want to go ahead and mention our pranayama, or our breath exercises here, and how they can positively impact the nervous system. So in completing our different pranayama practices, such as the Ujjayi breath, our victorious breath, or our Nadi Shodhana, or our bumblebee breath, no matter which pranayama that we decide to complete at any given moment, many of them have common benefits for the nervous system. I have some of them listed here for us. So practicing our breath or pranayama allows a person to turn more inward and think more internally into themselves. These breath exercises help stimulate energy channels, which can bring mental clarity and focus. It also increases your oxygen levels in the body, as well as it stills the mind and it quiets the body. So this can help support our nervous system, but also calm our nervous system. I know that in our postures or our asanas, we sometimes have to remind ourselves to continue to find these yogic breathing exercises paired with our asanas so that we can find maximum benefits to our practice. here I have listed some of the postures. Note just some, because there's so many that can support the nervous system. But here are some of our postures or asanas that support the nervous system. I've given a couple photos here, but would be more than happy to get with anybody after they watch this presentation if they have some more questions about the different postures and how that they benefit the nervous system. I'm going to give a brief overview of each of these. So our Tadasana, or our mountain pose. So as we all know, this is a very strong pose, very grounding. It helps to increase body awareness, but it also balances the nervous system. So our Chaturanga Dandasana, or our plank pose, it cultivates equanimity, and it's developing the ability to remain calm as challenges arise. So equanimity is like balance, equalness within the body. So another really good one there. Our Adho Mukha Svanasana, or downward dog. It actually tractions and helps to align the spine. It also integrates the mind, the body, and the spirit. So again, kind of coming back to that balance while also giving some physical traction and alignment to your spine. Next up, we have our Utkantasana, or our chair pose. So this one helps to support our nervous system by cultivating stress hardiness, and it cultivates balanced personal power. Next, we have our Dandasana, or our staff pose. This also, like down dog, it helps to lengthen and also align the spine. Our Paripurna Navasana, or our seated boat. Again, we're supporting the alignment of our spine here. So a lot of physical benefits here. Let's see, our next one is our Padmasana, or lotus pose. This supports the nervous system as it cultivates inner alignment and peace. So this one kind of gives us more of that internal emotional well-being piece of calming that nervous system versus a physical traction or alignment. It helps that inner alignment and our inner peace. Next, we have our Balasana, or our child's pose. So this one helps to traction the spine. So again, pulling. Traction is, I guess I should have defined that earlier. Traction means pulling it away. Instead of compressing the spine, it's able to traction it and have that gentle pull from end to end. So from, the crown of our head all the way down to our tailbone. Balasana also helps to facilitate circulation. So as I said previously, and when I say circulation, I'm referring to, blood circulation. But to the head, to the senses, to the brain, but it also helps to calm the nervous system. So as I said previously, increased circulation of blood means increased oxygen being brought to all areas of the body, which is going to help with healing. It's going to help with repairing any torn muscles. It's going to help you to release any tension. Very, very helpful. So next is our Virabhadrasana 3, or Warrior 3. So that lengthens and aligns your spinal column, and it's cultivating stress hardiness again. So we got a couple here now that help cultivate stress hardiness and keep us calm while challenges arise. So it's giving us a pretty good challenge while staying stable. So being able to hold that pose and conquer that is helping to cultivate our stress hardiness. And then the last one I have listed here is our Shavasana, or our corpse pose. So our corpse pose actually balances all of our body systems. As we know, it's a delicious pose, and the more we do it, I think the more we want to do it as yogis and yoginis. But, along with balancing all the body systems, it, particularly balances the nervous and the endocrine and the digestive system. But I did want to note that a lot of the endocrine system structures are actually located inside of the brain. For example, the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus. But as we know from earlier in this presentation, is part of the nervous system as a whole. So those kind of go together there. Let's see. Our corpse pose, or Shavasana, is also beneficial for anxiety, stress, and high blood pressure as it cultivates deep relaxation. So in our Shavasana, I know we like to focus on our pranayama and our breath, as well as the posture itself, and combining those two, I think really can help to calm that nervous system. And I know that in times of high stress, or if I'm starting to feel anxious, that is a posture that I can always turn to in order to help calm my nervous system in general. This slide has a 6-minute, just a short little yoga sequence that I will show you and also talk through with you. And it was designed with asanas that will help to calm the nervous system. So if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, or maybe you just want to get centered at the beginning of your day before you get the day started, or before you sit down to do some important seated work that you might have to do that day. This is a really great sequence in order to help calm that nervous system and prepare and help organize yourself for the day.
I want you to come into a nice child's pose. You may separate the knees and fold the body forward, pushing those hips into the heels, reaching those arms out in front of you. Taking deep inhales, feeling your lungs fill up all the way to the bottom, and an even deeper exhale, sinking further into this position. When you rise back up, I want you to swing your feet around. Place them out straight in front of you with toes shining towards the ceiling, our staff pose or our Dandasana. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, frame the knee, come to a flat back. Feeling length from the base of your spine all the way to the crown before rounding the spine and rolling forward, allowing the crown to shine towards your toes. You can inhale and lengthen through the spine once more. And exhale, round down, maybe getting a little bit closer to your legs. Inhale, roll back up. I want you to find the soles of the feet to come together and allow the knees to fall out to the side for our Baddha Konasana, or butterfly. We'll inhale, lean forward, flat back. Before exhaling and rounding the spine, bringing your nose to your toes. Inhale, lengthen through the spine. Exhale, round down. Take a few breaths here. Try to relax. If you feel tight in the hips, send breath to it. We tend to hold a lot of emotional stress in our hips, so hip openers are very important. Let's come to an easy seat now. We're going to do some alternate nostril breathing. So we're going to place our thumb on one side of our nostril. Inhale, switch, exhale. And we'll inhale again. We're going to switch fingers and block off the other nostril. And exhale. And inhale again on this side. Before switching fingers and blocking off to exhale. Inhale. Switch fingers, block off the nostril, exhale. Inhale. Place your index finger back on, switch fingers, exhale. Excellent. Just take a moment to return to normal breathing and note the benefits of the Nori Shodhana breath. Let's turn and come and find our spine. Bring our heels closer to our glutes, tummy tight, shoulders underneath us. And we're going to come from a point of strength. Lift up, up, up through our glutes and push away from the floor. Keeping our tummy tight, glutes engaged, knees parallel. Slowly roll down vertebrae by vertebrae. And we're going to do it again. Make sure those nibs are ribbed together. Take an inhale. Lift up, 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 up. Making sure that the weight is in the shoulders, not in the neck in this posture. Exhale, coming down. Let's take one more. Pelvis tucked under. Ribs tight. Push, push, push. All the way up. If you would like, you can connect the hands underneath. This is a nice heart opener. If it's in your practice to do so today. If not, the hands can remain by the side. Exhale, rolling down, articulating through the spine. Our next pose is going to be our waterfall pose. You can put your legs straight up, or if you have a pillow or a block, you can place it underneath the sacrum, or you can always use a wall for support for those legs. It's a very restorative posture. Helps lower blood pressure, helps calm and rebalance the nervous system. Helps you to absorb the benefits of your yoga practice. Continue to take deep breath in. And when you exhale, just let it go. Thinking about all that you've accomplished in your day, thanking yourself for showing up on the mat. And carefully bring the legs back down and roll to your right side. Take some deep breaths in and exhale out. Relax, using your arm as a pillow. Slowly push to an easy seated position. Inhale, light and love. Exhale, hands to heart center. Inhale, confidence. And exhale, doubt. Let's do our arms one more time. Inhale, gratitude. Exhale, hands to heart center. Thank you so much for practicing with me today. May the light in me honor the light in you. Namaste.
This slide has a 6-minute, just a short little yoga sequence. I want to thank all of you for watching my presentation on the nervous system and how yoga can positively impact it. If you have any further questions or comments or would like to have any discussion about this presentation, feel free to reach out to me via phone, or you can drop a comment on this post today. I'd be more than happy to go into further depth on anything or try to give other examples in order to better explain how these elements are connected. Thank you so much. Namaste.